now we're going to start looking at negations a little bit more in depth. We're going to look at negations of conditional statements, negations of conjunctions and disjunctions, and ultimately get into something called De Morgan's law, which is actually similar to a De Morgan's law that we've seen before with set theory. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Anyway, what I want to do is start out with an example and then kind of break it down a little bit and look at some equivalencies and negations of this. So a very famous or common conditional statement, Jesus said, if you love me, then you will keep my commandments, right? That's conditional, if then, okay? We can break that down symbolically. We can represent each part, the antecedent and the consequent, as P and Q. And then we can kind of look at that. Maybe we say P is you love me, well, Jesus, right? And then Q is you keep my commandments. Okay? So we have those two statements. Now, assuming that to be true, or assuming him to be telling the truth, that could be seen a couple different ways. We know that any statement and its negation, if you put them together in a conjunction, let's say we had, P and not P, right? We know that anything and its negation with a conjunction is always false, right? This is a self-contradiction. We also know that any statement or its negation is always true. That's called a tautology. One of those has got to be true, and so the disjunction with those will always be true in every case, right? No matter what the combination is there, whether P is true or false, the disjunction with P and not P is always true. So we know that it is always the case, no matter what, that a person either loves Jesus or doesn't, right? Either P or not P. That's always true. So we can say that P or not P is always true. Either you love him or you don't. And we can also reverse the order, right? The order of the negation doesn't matter in a disjunction. So we could say not P or P. There's a reason I'm switching the order here. Now, if it's this case, not P, then this conditional doesn't apply. He doesn't state in here what happens if you don't love him, right? It's conceivable that if you don't love him, you don't keep his commandments. It's also conceivable that you may not love him and still keep his commandments for other reasons, right? So this doesn't really apply. It's considered true. The conditional is considered true when not P occurs. But when P occurs, when P is false, but when P occurs, then the conditional implies that Q also must follow. And so we could say that it's really the same as not P or Q, right? Because if it's this one, then we have that covered. If it's this one, well, this is the consequent. So it's going to follow that Q occurs. So what we could say is either you don't love Jesus or you do follow his commands, right? One of those two things has to be true. That noise is really annoying. There's a mower outside. Anyway, so not P or Q. So one of those two must be true. So either you don't love me or you keep my commandments. Okay? What I want to show is that these two statements, the not P or Q and the original P implies Q, are actually equivalent. So let's use a truth table here for a moment. P, Q. Well, apologize for the background noise there. I'm not running the mower, so. All right, so P is true, true, false, false. Q is true, false, true, false. And I'm looking at P implies Q. Now we know, let's put not P in there. Let's start with that one. I know not P is going to be false, false, true, true. Now if I want P implies Q, P implies Q is only false when P is true, Q is false, so that's false. And then you have true, true, true elsewhere. And then of course we have this disjunction. So I'm looking at not P or Q. Alright, now not P or Q, that basically means, because it's a disjunction, either not P or Q has to be true. If they're both false, then you get a false. So as long as one of them is true, the disjunction is true. So here Q is true. Here neither is true. They're both false. Here one is true. Well, actually both are true. And here, well, one's true, so it must be true. Okay? And so you can see that we pair these up, and the two columns there, the truth values, are all the same. And so we would say then that P, if P then Q is equivalent to not P or Q. Alright, that's going to be important. Now let's look at the negation of these two statements. So if I were to write out here, and we'll add another column to the truth table, I'll keep a gap, but if I were to say not P, if P then Q, which is equivalent to saying not P or Q, right? Those two would be the same. So the negation of if the two statements are equivalent, then their negations must be equivalent, right? Okay, so let's take a look at what would happen, or what must happen on our truth table in order to get one of these negations. Well, basically all of the truth values have to flip. So the trues become false, the false becomes true. And so let's just go with, we'll just work with it on the conditional side here. So you'd have false, true, false, false. Okay? Okay, so now let's kind of look at what that would mean, in English, right, verbally, before I go back and try to combine some of these things to make it work. So let's make a little space here. Now, if we were to say either you don't love me or you keep my commandments, one of those two things must be true, then the negation of that must mean that both of these things must be false, right? So if one or the other is true, makes that statement true, then both of them must be false in order to negate that. So what you have to do is negate both of these and say and. So you'd say, you do love me and you don't keep my commandments. That would be the negation of this statement. So you do love me and you don't keep my commandments. Okay, so think about that. That's a conjunction. It's P and not Q, right? That's P and not Q. So let's take a look at that. Let's maybe I'm gonna move some of the stuff up out of the way here. Let's take this portion. We just said that P implies Q is equivalent to not P or Q. Okay. So now let's see if we can get this sequence out of this statement. See if it works. So here I have you do love me, which is P, and don't keep my commandments, not Q. Alright, let's see if that's equivalent to the other two. Okay, it kind of makes sense in English, but let's see if it's equivalent. So let's go, oh, I need not P, or not Q, right? Before I go too far here. Because I don't have not Q on the list. So let's look at not Q. Not Q is going to be false, true, false, true. And then P and not Q. Or P and not Q is going to only be true if both P and not Q are true, right? If both of them. So I got P column, the not Q column. I've got a false there. I don't have a false there, so that's true. I have a false, I have a false. So it's going to be false, true, false, false. And of course it does match with the one we just created, which is the negation of these two, right? The conditional and the disjunction, okay? So what we've done is we've found a negation, a proper negation based upon the truth values being opposite. And so I can really generalize this now to say that the negation of a conditional is equivalent to this conjunction, okay? So in other words, if you have a conditional, if you love me, then you'll keep my commandments, its negation, if you were to say it is not the case that if you love me, then you keep my commandments, that's equivalent to saying you love me and you don't keep my commandments. So it's a so the condition, the negation of the conditional becomes a conjunction with the antecedent and the negation of the consequent. Okay. Well, there's a lot of words. I'm not even sure I kept them all straight. I think I did. I think that's right. So the negation is a conjunction. So let's rewrite this a little bit. So we could say it is not the case that if you love me, then you will keep my commandments. Okay, that's the negation of the original statement. Okay, so that's this not if P then Q. It's equivalent then, I'll get rid of my disjunction, I'm running out of space here. So it's equivalent to saying either, or no, this is an and. So it's you love me and you don't keep my commandments. Which is actually what I just have written up here already, so don't really need to rewrite it, but I did. That's okay. So these two statements are equivalent to each other. The negation of the conditional and then the conjunction with the antecedent and the negation of the consequent. Okay, now, of course, if that could be true, if this was actually real, then that would be proving Jesus to be a liar, right? Because he said, if you love me, then you keep my commandments. So if it's possible to love him and not keep his commandments, then you'd be proving him to be a liar, which is not possible, right? Anyway, so yeah, that makes sense. So what he's basically saying is that keeping his commandments must be a necessary consequence of loving him. Okay, that makes sense. Anyway, so that's, now we also can look at this idea here. I didn't talk about that. Now the negation of the disjunction should be the same. It should have the same false, true, false, false combination there. And so if we were to write that one out in word form, I'll switch colors here. And let's get rid of this. If I were to write that out, so that would be, I just erased what I needed. I'm looking at not, bad color. Let's go this one. Not P or Q, right? That's the one I was just pointing at. So that would be like saying it is not the case that either one or the other, either you don't love me or you keep my commandments. Alright, so it says it is not the case that either you don't love me or you keep my commandments. Wrap your mind around that one, right? I don't know. Anyway, math is hard, guys. It is. Cool. Alright, good enough. We'll move on in the next video.